Hello, hi, welcome. This is the first Grow Wild Live question and answer session, and it's all about wildflowers. So thank you so much for tuning in. My name's Chloe, and I'm the Engagement and Training Officer here at Grow Wild. I do a lot of work with our younger audiences, particularly our youth projects and grant programs, and I'm also heavily involved with our training offer, which is part of what we're delivering with you as our lovely audience today. I'm also joined by Ellen Rowland, who's our communications executive. Ellen, would you like to tell us a little bit about what you do?
Hi there. Yeah, so as Chloe said, hi, nice to meet you all. I'm Ellen. I am the comms executive for Grow Wild. So that basically means I look after everything from our social media accounts to our newsletter and lots of website content. And I've been helping Chloe and develop these training sessions today. So I hope you enjoy it.
Thank you, Ellen. We're also very lucky that today we've been joined by two of Kew's conservation scientists who are here to be our voices of expertise and to answer all your tricky questions. So we're joined by Dr. Chris Cockel. Chris, I don't know whether you'd like to tell us a little bit about you.
Yes, hello and welcome everyone. So I'm Chris Cockel and I'm the UK Native Seed Hub Coordinator at the Millennium Seed Bank based at Wakehurst Place in West Sussex. And that basically involves working with conservation partners around the UK, helping them to manage their sites and to choose species, native species to restore their sites and to improve their habitat for wildlife.
Brilliant, thank you. And we've also got Ted Chapman, who is also in the Conservation Science Department. Ted, would you like to just introduce yourself for us?
Sure, thanks, Chloe. Hi, everybody. My name is Ted. I coordinate the UK team, or the UK programme at the Millennium Seed Bank. So our team is responsible for collecting seed from the UK's wild plants and then making that seed available to support conservation work. And my background actually is in horticulture and gardening, and so it's been my pleasure really to be involved with Grow Wild right from the start, so for several years now. So bringing the kind of native seeds kind of out and getting them out there into communities, it's been a great delight.
Brilliant, thank you, Ted. We've also behind the scenes, we've got Alison, who's working away to bring the slides to you. So we're a team here. We really wanted to do this session today because we get so many questions coming into us all the time from our enthusiastic audience wanting to find out about maybe what to plant, to understand more about different species of wildflowers, how to plant, how to grow, how to prepare a site, all kinds of things. And often quite similar questions come up. So we feel like by doing a session like this, we can bring answers to more of you that you may find of interest and benefit, which is, we hope you're going to really enjoy. Also, we wanted to make this an interactive session, so you get to maybe pose some questions to our experts and also to hear from us at the Grow Wild team. So we've sifted through some of our most frequently asked questions to go through with you today. And we're also going to be offering the question answer box, which you can enter any questions as we go through. And Ellen's going to be keeping an eye on those. And at the end, we're going to rattle through some more that you've posed to us live today. We probably won't get through everyone, but we're going to try and group them so we can cover some of the most frequently and most desired answers, really, asked questions. So please don't be shy. Please feel free to enter something into there. Great. And we're going to crack on, I think. So today's Q&A. So the sorts of things we're going to be covering today are going to be around how we at Grow Wild put together our wildflower mixtures. So as some of you will know, we give out seed kits every year. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we put that together and how we design the kits. We're also going to talk about maybe why some people's wildflowers didn't grow. We do get that question sometimes, I'm afraid, and there's lots of reasons why. So we're going to cover off that one. We're going to look at what wildflowers to use in different locations. So thinking about your site conditions, whether it's somewhere sunny or shady, we're going to talk about that some. And we're also going to talk about what to do in the winter, because that's often seen as quite a quiet time if you're into growing wildflowers. So we're going to talk about that one. and we're going to look at what to do with a bigger site. So if you're really keen and you want to do a really big wildflower area, we're going to talk a bit about how to prepare that and the sorts of seeds and volumes of seeds you might need. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an overview of what we're going to be discussing. And I think the first thing we're going to come on to is mixtures. So here at Grow Wild, as I mentioned, we give out seed kits regularly, and our scientists at Kew are instrumental in helping us get those kits together. So over to the experts. Just how do we design and source our wildflower mixtures?
Okay, well, I can kick off with this one. So it's kind of a tall order, really, designing a seed mix that could be used pretty much anywhere. We're not quite sure where, under all sorts of different circumstances in the UK. And first and foremost, that it's going to work, because we want people to have a positive experience, not a negative one. So we're thinking about common wildflowers. So they're widespread, they're not rare, so that can cause us sort of ecological problems moving rare species around. So common widespread wildflowers that are going to thrive in a mix of situations, some annuals in there for kind of quick impact, along with some perennials that can follow that and provide a longer lasting display in subsequent years. And just kind of a nice mix of colours and shapes. So there are sort of aesthetic as well as ecological or horticultural considerations that go into that. And so we produce a kind of long list of species which we think would work. And then we go out to specialist native seed suppliers in England and Wales for one mix, to Northern Ireland for another, and to Scotland for another. And these suppliers have got quite a lot of know-how about what will work in their kind of respective countries, which is helpful. And they will supply us with samples of seed, which we then test. And the slide that Chloe's put up there shows a seed test in progress. So we will X-ray seed, and you can see that with the corn cockle on the right there, which tells us, you know, how the seed is filled, whether it's looking healthy, whether it's been infested by anything. And then we'll conduct a germination test, which you can see on an agar plate there on the left. And we ask that all the seed that goes into our mix is at least 70% viable, so at least 70% of the seed will germinate. And that's actually quite a high bar for these types of species, which are naturally variable and naturally quite difficult to produce. So we know that the seed you get is of good quality, and we know it's come from a specialist producer, and we ask them to show us whether that it's come from a natural population in the UK. It's not been imported from somewhere else. So that's kind of some of the thinking that goes into the wildflower mixtures. And some years we've done lots of specialist mixtures, some years we just do one that will cover lots of areas, but the same basic principles apply. I think that probably covers it.
Yeah, great, thanks Ted. And it's really quite a long process that gets underway quite, you know, several months before we even get to the stage of advertising our kit. So I think probably people don't always know what goes on behind the scenes. So hopefully that's been an interesting insight for everybody. Yeah, very detailed work, shall we say. So Thank you for that. Great. Okay, shall we move on to our next one? So why problems? Why didn't my wildflowers grow? Unfortunately, we do get that question sometimes. Obviously, as you were saying, Ted, we want everybody to have a great experience particularly when they're growing seeds with us using our kits. But you know, for any wildflower seeds that people are getting underway with, it's always disappointing if they haven't seen results. So perhaps you could share some of the reasons as to why things don't always turn out how we want.
Yeah, so I think I was going to tackle this one.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah. That's the word. So there are many cases, many examples of where you may not see the results you expect, and this may be down to the seed quality to start off with. Obviously, if you're using Grow Wild seed material, you should be guaranteed to get at least 70% germination. So that is something that we strive for, so that you can hopefully rule out the fact that it's poor seed quality if you're getting seed from the Grow Wild project. And so we've tested the seed for viability, and so we know we've got good seed quality. There may also be issues with site preparation. You see, I put a picture there of a project I was involved in London, and that was basically in an urban park where they wanted to create a bit more diversity in the habitats. And what we did there was we had to clear away an area with picks and shovels basically, and it's back-breaking work, but it's well worth putting in the time to do that. So site preparation is crucial. I know that not everyone will be able to perhaps be able to tap into volunteer time. You might be trying to create a wildflower meadow out of an existing patch of grass, and that can be a struggle, because obviously you've got competition from the grasses initially, and then even once you've cleared away the topsoil, as you have to do if you want to create a good sterile bed for sowing the seeds, then you may get to start off with, you're probably going to get more aggressive weeds, docks and thistles and things like that. And so it's a matter of being patient and not necessarily expecting results in the first season. So you have to be patient. But as I say, preparation is key. When you sow the seeds, make sure you don't bury the seeds. You can use some sand in there to assist with dispersal and make sure the seeds are settled on the surface. And also be careful not to sow the seeds on a windy day. That's not always possible to set the calendar right, but if you're out there trying to sow seeds and it's really windy, it can be very frustrating if they're being carried away by the wind. And also watering is crucial. So like all newly established seeds or plants, you need to make sure they get just the right amount of water, not too much water. Don't if you're like my son, you like to pour lots of water on and wash all the seeds away. Be careful not to do that. And then afterwards, as I'm mentioning about weeds, make sure that you keep an eye on the site, pull out any aggressive weeds that come in there, and get to know those weeds before they become established. That's helpful to do that. Those are the main things. Mostly trying to reduce the competition for light and water, I think, are the key things. Did I miss anything, Ted?
I'll chip in on weeds actually, because in my experience, weeds are the real headache of establishing wildflower plantings. And I've got my kind of two top tips on weeds really is number one, it's the preparation, and particularly a stale seed bed technique. And if you're not familiar with this is where you clear your ground and you get it nice and crumbly, and you rake it and you get it nice and level as if for sowing, and then you leave it for a few weeks, and all the seed that is sitting on, all the weed seeds that are sitting on the surface will germinate. And then you get rid of them, you hoe them off, you pull them out, you smother them, and then you sow your wildflower seed, because it just kind of knocks out that first generation of weeds before you start. If you can schedule that in, that's a really neat trick. And the other thing, which seems a bit counterinstinctive, but it's worth trying, is to sow initially in rows or in staggered blocks, so that when your seedlings come up, you can distinguish what you've sown from the weeds that were in the soil when you started. And it looks a bit weird at first, but usually when the plants mature, it looks less weird, particularly if you do it in a sort of crisscross pattern like this. Yeah. So those are my top tips for beating the weeds.
Oh, great, thank you both. Some really useful little tips there. And I think the big takeaway we can have from that is that preparation is key. So it's worth spending the time to get it right to start with. So really fantastic tips there. Thank you both. And there is quite a lot of information also on the Grow Wild website about preparing your site. So if you want to read a bit more on that, we've got more on the website. So do have a little check on there. But some fantastic tips. Thank you so much both. Okay, so what have we got next? Oh, special situations. So we quite often have people get in touch with us about their specific site constraints, and telling us about what their field or garden is like, and how they would like, asking us what they could grow there. And it's obviously really difficult for us to reply to everybody, and we can't always give out specific advice because we simply can't see what your site is like. So coming on to the sort of question today, we would like to know roughly what people should think about growing in certain conditions. So the main sort of differences are being sunny, shady, wet or dry. So any tips, Ted and Chris, that you could give on those sort of specifics would be really helpful, I think, for our audience when they're thinking about what they could grow maybe at home or as part of a project they're involved with.
Okay, well, I can kick off with this one. So as I said, the kind of Grow Wild mix is a bit of a kind of coverall mix. So we try and put a bit of everything in to thrive in most circumstances. But some places can be very tricky, particularly in gardens and kind of in odd ends of places. I guess the good news, I would say, is that if you kind of look around us, it's self-evident that there's a plant for every spot. Everywhere is covered with vegetation virtually, unless it's concrete or tarmac. So there will be something. And my general approach to this is to kind of look about you in similar spots and see what you can see growing in hedgerows or in parks or in grasslands or meadows near you, and gain kind of, or woodlands, gain kind of inspiration directly from the wild. And also there's quite a lot of kind of useful information online about this, and indeed some kind of the specialist UK native seed suppliers would all provide specialist mixes or ranges of plants that will be suited to individual spots. So somebody will have done some of this thinking for you, which can be helpful. But I can certainly kind of run through some of my kind of top picks. And if you've got a kind of open, sunny spot, well, that's kind of easy, because most grassland or meadow plants like oxeye daisies, knapweed, buttercups, cowslips, these sorts of things will thrive in an open, sunny situation. So that's not so tricky. More often encountered in sort of parks and gardens are shady spots under hedges and trees, and your kind of inspiration there is woodlands and hedgerows. And really lovely things like primroses in the spring. In fact, there's a nice picture of some primroses in the woodland there. Foxgloves, red campion, these sort of very kind of common, typical, but very pretty hedgerow or woodland species. Also things like ivies are terribly tough, and we don't think of them as wildflowers, but ivy is hugely beneficial actually to pollinating insects and birds, flowering as it does in November. So ivy is not to be
yeah, I've seen pigeons on my ivy just today.
all ecologists love ivy.
Really? That's amazing.
Yes.
Don't cut the flowers off the ivy.
No, don't cut the flowers off. So think in damp spots, like sort of damp boggy bits, there's plenty of that where I live in Sussex. Meadow sweet is lovely, purple loosestrife if it's very wet, buttercups of all sorts, great burnet. So these are some nice damp loving species. And then in the really hot baked areas, and the picture of Castle Hill there, I mean, you will not get a finer wildflower site than that. That's chalk grassland, so very hot and sunny. And there you will find those really lovely aromatic species like wild thyme, wild marjoram, wild basil, salad burnet, the lovely sort of quaking grass.
Or thistle, as I remember sitting on.
Yes, plenty of thistles. Yeah, they tend to go down less well in people, but lovely in their place. So rest assured, there is a species for the spot you have. The trick is just working out what it is. There's a bit of a brain dump for you.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I think it's a really positive message that, yeah, there is definitely something for everywhere. It's just doing your research, I think, isn't it? And it sounds like you can be quite creative and think about, you know, creating a space that's really unique and picking all the right species that are going to sit well there and provide for other, you know, animals and pollinators that reside there too. So
yeah, I'd say that process of going out and looking for me is part of it, you know, just noticing what's working well where you are, taking inspiration from that. It's easier said than done, I know, but it's worth it if you can.
So really getting to know your site is really worth doing before you sort of get underway, I think. Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you both for that one. That was fantastic. And we can move on to the next. So winter. So I think, you know, we all see pictures of wildflowers in lovely sunny weather, and perhaps don't think that there's much to be doing in winter time, but you know, it's looking ahead to the new growing season, I think, really. And so I think if you could share anything that our audience could be doing to prepare their wildflower patch for next year, I think everyone would find that really helpful. So any tips on that?
Yeah, so I think I was going to tackle this one. So actually, although obviously the wildflower meadow at its height in high summer is beautiful. I actually really enjoy the autumn and winter time, because this is an excuse to get your scythe out, and that's why I put the picture of people scything there at a site here on the left in Kingston, and on the right was actually at a site in Birmingham where I've been involved in a small project there. And so the first thing to do really is once all the flowers have finished their floral displays and starting to look a little tired in late August or September, that's a good chance to cut back the sward there and make sure that you cut it low to the ground. Using a scythe is a great way to do it, because it's a good way to get volunteers involved. It's a fairly low impact way of managing the site, rather than going around with a motorized strimmer. The scythe really you get a chance to move things out of the way. So I've quite often actually come across frogs who have been sort of resting in the grass, sheltering in the grass, and it gives you a chance. They'll hop up, and then you have a chance to move them out of the way. It always makes me rather nervous, but so far I haven't injured. No frogs have been injured in this in the production of this program. So and the other thing to do once you've cut the grass down short, whether you choose to use a scythe or other methods, make sure you clear away the clippings, so that one of the biggest challenges in terms of managing a meadow is trying to keep the nutrient levels low, because the wildflowers that we're trying to encourage really like low nutrient conditions, whereas the site on the right, well, both sites actually, they're starting from an area that was previously just grass, and so it's important every year to clear away the material. And then the other thing that we've done is in the winter we've put in plugs of some things like cowslips. We're putting cowslip plugs, or to try and reduce the grasses, we want to try and encourage yellow rattle into there. So we've, rather than clearing away the whole site, we've basically made scrapes in the grass and sprinkled in some yellow rattle seeds, and those have come up. So that's been worthwhile. And also it gives you a chance to remove some of these aggressive weeds. So if at that point you do see docks coming in, you can go through there with a fork and dig them out, and use that to create space for more wildflower seeds. So just a few things to bear in mind for the winter there.
Great, thanks, Chris. So it sounds like there's plenty you can be getting on with. It's not a sleepy time for us. We can be doing lots to get ready for the new season.
Yep.
I just wondered if you didn't have access to a scythe, was there anything that you would suggest as a sort of best alternative if you didn't happen to have one, or is the scythe the sort of the go-to if you can?
Yeah, well, that site in Birmingham, they have resorted to a strimmer when I haven't been able to get up there. So you can use a strimmer, but it tends to be a bit, yeah. It can be done by one person if you haven't got a band of willing volunteers, which is it's usually me trying to do it all in one day with a scythe. But yeah.
I would I would commend the use of a scythe. It probably is optimum, really, but in general, you have to make use of the machinery that you have to hand, and strimmers are a blunt instrument, but they can work. They do work. A strimmer and then raking up what you strim off, or sometimes rotary lawnmowers, even a regular domestic lawnmower, particularly if you've been able to reduce the height a bit with a strimmer or with a scythe, and they will pick up the arisings. That could work well. Then on larger scales, people will usually use kind of more like agricultural equipment, or mini balers, things like this to kind of stop the sward and gather it up and remove it. But kind of, if you can reduce the height a bit, then a standard kind of robust rotary lawnmower can do quite a good job. And all I'd say is, I always advise people to get their meadows or their wildflower areas really low by the spring. So they should almost look like a lawn going into the winter. They should be really quite low. But if you can, leave areas uncut, so there's some standing dead vegetation there, habitat and food over winter. So you've got to kind of mix the two.
Yeah, that'll bring us onto the next slide that shows a good larger area that's been cleared.
There you are.
That's why the picture on the left there really shows if you want to create a larger wildflower, or even not a larger wildflower meadow, but if you want to prepare the soil on the left hand side there, we're talking about preparing larger areas. This was actually prepared with a heavy horses and a chain harrow. So it was a really muddy day, really unpleasant conditions, but actually you can see the results there on the right hand side. So sorry, Chloe, I preempted your question.
No, it's okay. No, it all links on very nicely. So thank you. So yeah. So in terms of preparing a larger site, yeah, your examples are great. And seeing the images before of doing the siding. But if you want to do a bigger site, what would you say about purchasing the seeds for it? Because there's something we get asked quite regularly is where can we buy seeds, or what should we look out for when we're buying seeds, particularly if we want to do a bigger site and we need sort of quantity. Is there any things that people should be aware of when they are sort of selecting the right seeds?
Okay, maybe I'll start with this one. So if you're talking about creating larger areas of wildflowers, I'd say you've kind of got two approaches to take with regards to introducing seed. One is kind of direct harvested seed, or the transfer of seed from one site to another. If you've got a really nice donor site locally that you're working with, and you can take seed from that place to your new site, either by transferring hay or through direct harvesting seed using a brush harvester. So that's one approach, and it would require a specialist contractor or somebody with some kind of experience in seed transfer techniques. But it's sometimes preferred because what you get then is quite a locally distinctive and kind of locally specific mix of seed. So if sort of people working in nature reserves and all sort of high impact sites often use that approach. But in most cases, the most practical option is going to be to buy seed or a seed mix from a commercial seed supplier. So these are specialist growers who collect seed from the wild and then grow it on it as an agricultural crop in large quantities, and that tends to make it more cost effective for use on larger scales. And there are several of these operating in the UK, and you can find them online. And I think the Grow Wild website has a list of many, if not all, of those suppliers in the UK. So I guess what I'd say about that is, I mean, you have to think carefully, obviously, about which species you want in your mix and the growing conditions that you can provide. Think about the context of the site, where it's located, and you know, how it's going to make a good fit with the landscape surrounding it. And then I guess it's kind of on you then to think about how you find a good high quality seed, and you should be looking for a supplier that is committed to sourcing and growing UK native seed. So that's seed that was originally sourced from a wild population in the UK that's growing it here in the UK, and that's committed to seed quality, and some producers will test their seed and so we're able to kind of vouch for the quality of the seed. And if you're not reassured from reading the website or the catalogue, you can always ask these questions yourself. So it's a slight question of buyer beware. Do your research and ask these questions. But good quality seed is available in large volumes. But often you're spending quite a bit of money on this, so it's worth just doing a bit of homework and asking some questions if you need to.
Yeah, great. So yeah, don't be shy to ask questions before you buy. I think is one of the takeaways, and to really look at your site location and think about what's going to work best there, particularly for, you know, looking at other species and habitats of wildlife that are in the local area to make sure it's going to thrive and support the sort of life that you want to see there. So thank you. Great. Okay, well, we've rattled through those, and you've given us some fantastic information. Thank you both. I think Ellen's been keeping an eye on the question and answer as we've been going through. Yeah. Ellen, have you had any interesting questions come up?
I've had some really good questions through. There's a few of them I think we've covered, which is great during the presentation. So thank you, Ted and Chris, for that. So I've got a few. And some of them are quite similar, so I've sort of grouped them together so that we can try and cover as much ground as possible. So we've had a question about growing wildflowers in a rainy climate and how to prevent sort of overwatering in wetter climates. So I know we talked a little bit about damp and shady areas, but in terms of the actual rainfall, is there anything we can do to prevent overwatering?
You have an idea, Ted? Go ahead.
Okay, well, I guess it depends what the issue is. So I guess one issue is when you sow seed and you get such heavy rain, it will washes away. So you avoid that by consolidating, and I've learned through this experience, you avoid that by consolidating the ground, so it's nice and firm, sowing your seed and then just raking them lightly in so they have really good contact with the soil, and then they're much less likely to wash away. If the site is permanently wet and waterlogged, then you need to think about the species that you're growing and choose species that are naturally adapted to those conditions. And we talked about some earlier, and there will be, there are mixes available which are adapted to this, and it's always sensible to kind of pick the species that are going to thrive rather than sort of struggle to change the habitat or the situation to suit a different suite of species. So if it's kind of perennially wet, choose plants from wet grasslands, boggy conditions. But if it's just wet where you live, but the water isn't sort of standing on the soil, it's probably not going to be a problem. Plants that are growing in the soil, and if they're well adapted to those conditions, won't mind lots of rain, as long as they're not sitting in water. So if the ground is reasonably well drained but just wet, it probably wouldn't be too much of a problem, would be my expectation. And if it's not working out, it's probably because the species selection isn't quite right for the site. That would be my guess.
Yeah,
That's great. Thank you.
I was just going to say that at a site at Wakehurst, where the Millennium Seed Bank is based, we did actually have some trial plots out there, and we had a real problem with the beds getting really waterlogged, and so we did try and improve the drainage a little bit. But the other thing we did was that we put one thing we didn't mention that we've used on some larger sites is we actually used horticultural fleece to give the seeds a bit of protection and also to prevent them being predated by birds or being blown away, and that might also help to just keep the seeds bedded to the ground and leave that on for a little bit. If you're not covering a massive area, that can be a good way to help the seeds get established.
Brilliant, thank you both for that. We've also had a question about attracting pollinators and biodiversity. We've had a couple of questions about different insects. So I was just wondering whether you'd be able to talk a little bit about which species are best for encouraging pollinators and encouraging biodiversity.
So different pollinators or different insects in general, and then obviously the kind of birds or mammals that feed off those have different preferences for different shapes of flowers. So I guess the key is probably having a variety of different species, and that will provide a variety of different flower structures. So thinking about daisy-shaped flowers, which are very kind of open and they're easy for insects to land on and gather nectar, along with umbellifers. So they're the kind of cow parsley shaped flowers, which some insects prefer, along with some more sort of tubular ones. If you can imagine foxgloves, which are more tubular in shape, and the insects have to go right inside them to kind of get to the nectar. So providing a kind of range of flower types, and also just thinking about continuity of provision. So many or most insects actually will visit a number of different flowers. They just need them to be continuous from the spring right through to the autumn. So giving a bit of thought to early flowering plants like primroses, for example, or red dead nettle. That's not a hugely showy plant, but it's much beloved of pollinators in the early spring, right through to kind of late flowering plants, things like scabiouses or devil's bit scabious in particular, that flower right on into the autumn and provide a kind of continuity of nectar all the way through, not just in the kind of peak season. So I'd probably go for variety and continuity rather than picking a single kind of species that covers it all. And ivy, of course.
Great. Don't forget the ivy. That's great, Ted. Thank you. And for anyone that's interested to learn more about the different species and to read more about the individual flowers in detail, there's a wildflower gallery on the Grow Wild website that you can access, which will tell you a bit more about each species. So if you need to kind of refresh your memory after the talk, you can find a bit more info there. And I think we'll just have one final question because I'm just a bit conscious of time. Somebody's asked a question about how is the best way to rewild their garden. So should they just leave it and let it do its thing, or is there any kind of process that they should be doing? I know that's a slightly broader question, but yeah, hopefully you've got some thoughts on that.
Wow, that's a great question.
Depends how big your garden is. Yeah.
Yes, it helps if your garden is several hundred hectares. Yeah. Well, so rewilding, I guess the kind of cornerstone is rewilding that you allow natural processes to determine what happens in your plot, rather than deciding it all for yourself and kind of micromanaging it all for yourself. So that does tend to work better on the bigger scales where you've got things like kind of grazing animals, and maybe you've got things like flooding or natural processes that are sort of guiding how plants and different species kind of evolve and mesh together. But I guess some of the concepts can probably be borrowed on a smaller scale. So just thinking about reducing the intensity with which you manage your garden. So relaxed mowing, being a bit less tidy-minded, so allowing sort of leaves to fall and remain, at least in certain areas of your garden, allowing wood to accumulate, your dead wood to accumulate if you can. Just being mindful before you pull weeds out, whether or not that weed you're pulling out is in fact a kind of wildflower that's providing a benefit to insects or other wildlife. I think it's quite difficult in a small scale to let go completely, because generally speaking what happens then is your garden will just get swamped with a small number of very invasive weeds, and unless you've got grazing animals to kind of chomp them back, what you'll actually end up with is something that's less desirable and less species rich than a sort of halfway house between a manicured garden and a complete wilderness. So I should go with a bit of management, but just thinking carefully about how much you're doing and whether there are areas you can afford to just kind of get a bit messy around the edges. Does that make sense, Chris? Have you kind of got any?
Yeah, so I would say just it mainly depends on the size of the garden, but if you've got a small patch like I have, I'm just trying to leave out, as you say, don't be so tidy. I mean, we're a great nation of gardeners, but the wildlife likes to be a bit scruffy, so don't be afraid of leaving a few rough edges around the garden.
Brilliant. Thank you both very much for that. That was our final question. So I'll hand back over to Chloe, but thanks. Hopefully those have answered some of your questions. I'm sorry we didn't get time to answer every single one, but hopefully we've managed to cover off the vast majority of them.
Okay, thank you, Ellen, and thank you, Ted and Chris. I hope everybody has enjoyed this session. Please do let us know what you think. If you have enjoyed it, that's great, or if you've got any suggestions for future. We're hoping to do some more of these, so we'd really like your feedback. And just to mention that we've got another session coming up next Monday, which is going to be all about fungi. So will be a chance to hear a fungi expert from Kew talking about some of your recently and frequently asked questions on fungi, and also a chance for you to put some questions in a similar way to this session. So I think that one's 6 o'clock next Monday. Am I correct there, Ellen?
Yeah, that's right. I think it's 6. But I'm going to be putting another announcement out on social media, so Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. Make sure you're following us on there, and I'll send an update on there with the link. You can also find it under the events section of our Facebook page. So the link to join the session is very similar to this one. You just go through to the event and you should be able to find the link there.
Okay, brilliant. And thanks again to Ted and Chris. And I think if we do another session, it'll be sort of into the new year. We'll be looking ahead to the spring and getting everybody started on their projects for 2021. So yes, hope to see you again for another session soon on that.